over the last few years, I realized that I am hypersensitive to noise. Usually I can be very calm and happy, but if there is a lot of noise around me, I easily lose my cool, I lose my wherewithal, I lose my yoyu. And yoyu is a Japanese word used in daily conversation to indicate your ability or wherewithal to handle something. And depending on the context, having yo-yo could mean, for example, you have enough money to buy something, or you have enough time or energy or patience to handle a situation. And basically, you have the wherewithal to handle it. Well, when you don't have yo-yo, it means you don't have enough time or money or energy or bandwidth or experience or wherewithal or oomph to handle a situation. Um, Hi, I'm Marci Kobayashi, and if you're new here, Finding Yoyu is a memoir about the year when I helped my mother-in-law transition into a nursing home and end-of-life care, and helped try to understand and navigate Alzheimer's for my father-in-law after he came to live with us in Tokyo, and helped my husband through a chemo-free recovery from stage 3 colon cancer. And most of the time I had a lot of yo-yo, though there were some times when I didn't, and I had to learn how to protect my yo-yo or get it back. And that I want to share a couple of those life hacks with you, or daily house life, I guess life hacks with you today, that come up in the memoir. I first wrote the memoir back in 2018 and then put it aside. Didn't have the yo-yo to deal with it. And last year, a friend of mine suggested that I start sharing a section each week to get myself back in the writer's chair and get closer to actually publishing. And we are getting to the end. And like I said, today I want to share a couple of those life hacks that helped me maintain my yo-yo. And noise is one of them. So let me jump right in. I'll be reading from the page in front of me, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. After 6 months on a strict vegan diet, Akira decided to introduce fish and eggs back into his diet, so tamago gohan was back on our breakfast menu. Tamago gohan, which literally means egg rice, is very simple. A raw egg cracked over a hot bowl of white rice topped with a touch of soy sauce. It is savory, easy to prepare, and a favorite breakfast dish all over Japan. Though it was one of the fastest, easiest dishes to prepare, I had a love-hate relationship with tamago gohan. Combined with a hearty bowl of miso soup, I knew my family was getting a balanced meal. The raw egg part didn't bother me. The hot rice cooked the egg just enough so that the sliminess of the egg white disappeared. I loved it. My issue with tamago gohan was that it made breakfast time noisy. Tamago gohan was usually served in a porcelain bowl and eaten with a spoon. The sound of the spoon clanging against the bowl felt like someone was banging on my head. I tried to ignore the clanging, but it usually bothered me so much that I either snapped at Akira or I would avoid serving the dish altogether. So one of the first changes I made in our home after my bedside epiphany about creating a sacred sanctuary within had nothing to do with creating more space. Instead, it had to do with my ability to stay calm in our shared spaces. I bought wooden spoons and made everyone use them whenever I served dishes such as tamago gohan or curry rice that required spoons instead of chopsticks. Otosan didn't care, and Akira was obliging. I had NHK, the Japanese national TV channel, to thank. The morning talk show Asaichi ran an episode all about people who are hypersensitive. Akira used to get irritated and roll his eyes when I had to leave the room because the whine of the vacuum cleaner made me angry, or the sound of the water spraying down on our metal sink made my blood pressure go up. I was so grateful for the TV show because for the first time ever, Akira realized that what I was experiencing was real. He still teased me, but was much more understanding and mindful when I got that crazed look on my face. The wooden spoons were a huge relief and totally changed the dynamic of our breakfast time, in the same way that the little sign on the toilet room brought peace to the early mornings. Another change that came from my bedside epiphany was asking for a hug. Hugging is not a typical part of Japanese culture. With children, yes. Two individuals who are romantically involved might hug, but between friends, colleagues, and adult family members, hugging is rare compared with what you see in other countries. Being American and raised in a hugging family, Akira was used to me hugging him, and he would hug me back. Sometimes I would get irritated that he didn't initiate the hug. I tried explaining that it was important to me, but hugging didn't come naturally to him, and if I waited for him to initiate the hug, I would probably be waiting for months. The hugging deficit got worse after Oto-san came to live with us. In fact, we had stopped hugging altogether. So one morning, after Oto-san left for day service, I walked up next to Akira, who was sitting on the sofa watching TV. "Akira, I need your help with something." "Sure." He looked up, waiting for me to continue. "Could you stand up, please?" I asked evenly. I stepped back so he would have room to stand up. Then, stepping in front of him, I asked, "Could you give me a hug?" Akira gave me a hug. Hugging him back, I said thank you, and we both went about our day. The next day, I walked up to him again. "Could you stand up, please?" And without questioning, he stood up and gave me a hug. It was that easy. All I had to do was ask for what I needed or wanted, and he gave it without question. I couldn't believe it. At first, I half expected him to grimace or refuse. Instead, day after day, Akira stood up and gave me a hug. And I have another section. This one's called Pre-Dinner Ritual. The wooden spoons went a long way towards making our mealtimes less stressful. Then I found two other hacks that made mealtimes more peaceful: time shifting and pausing. One of my jobs in our household was to hold the space and be mindful of the space. I am the space keeper. Sometimes that meant strategically orchestrating who used our shared spaces and when they got used. Shifting our schedule by only 15 minutes made a huge difference. In fact, the 15 minutes before dinner determined whether our dinner was peaceful or painful. Oto-san was a talker. When he got on a roll, he could go on and on for over an hour. I timed it once during the summer I stayed in Hiroshima with him while Okasan was in the hospital. It was all I could do to stay awake while I listened to him, but I wanted to see if he would eventually stop on his own. 2 hours later, he got tired and stopped. The only thing that stopped Oto-san's jabber here in Tokyo was if his audience disappeared. In other words, I left the room for something. If it was only his son, he would quiet down. If I was in the room, Oto-san would keep talking. The problem was that Akira couldn't stand listening to his father. The tall tales, exaggerated gestures, and bravado grated on his nerves. Akira probably thought he was controlling his facial expressions, but it was obvious that listening to his father irritated him. The minute Oto-san started up, a stony mask fell over Akira's face and a black aura emanated from his body. It was awkward for everyone. Akira was learning to manage his feelings, but it was easier if the whole situation could be avoided. So what did that mean for us? It meant that I called Oto-san out for dinner at least 10 to 15 minutes before I was done preparing it. I did this because social interaction and chatting was good for Oto-san. He needed to be heard. Heck, we all needed to be heard. Oto-san was a master storyteller, and his whole body lit up when he began to talk. It was infectious and entertaining. You didn't have to understand what Oto-san was saying to enjoy the show. Our kitchen and living room were connected, with only a bar counter separating us. So, after calling Oto-san in for dinner, he sat on a sofa facing me while I finished up the preparations. If I did not say anything, he would turn on the TV. Oto-san was happy to watch TV while he waited for dinner to be served, but was visibly thrilled when I asked him how his day was. My purpose for asking was threefold. First, I was giving Oto-san a chance to socialize and vent. I was happy for Oto-san that he got to have me for his daughter-in-law because, being a chatty Gemini, I knew that verbally processing your day was cathartic. Oto-san didn't need me to offer solutions. He didn't need me to comment unless it was to commiserate. Mostly, he just needed me to listen and witness what he was going through. He almost always told the same stories over and over again. He would start with one episode from his day, and I would have heard the same episode at least 1 or 2 more times before dinner was ready. Listening to him vent, I noticed a pattern. He had certain people or activities that he liked, but as their ability changed, his opinion of them changed too. There was one lady he used to like and talked cheerfully about all the time. As her disease progressed, she was no longer able to play the card games Oto-san liked. She also lost her ability to perform group activities according to the rules. That's when Oto-san started complaining about her. From Oto-san's comments, I could understand that her disease was progressing, but I could also hear that he didn't understand that she had dementia. The progression of his dementia meant he was less and less tolerant of others with differing abilities. Perhaps he was always judgmental. Perhaps he used to be more skillful at masking his feelings about others. Now he was less and less able to mask what he felt. His filter for appropriateness was changing. Though he was still uber-conscious of following the rules and making sure whether or not everyone else was following them too, his understanding of what was appropriate to say aloud had totally changed. As I finished making dinner, I would let Oto-san run through his stories for the day. If he started to repeat a story, I would interrupt with another question. While the first purpose of calling him out to dinner early was to allow him to vent, the second purpose of my evening chats with Oto-san was to gauge his memory loss. I usually started with the same question: how was lunch? I wanted to check both his recall and the degree to which he could articulate. I knew he was a great storyteller, but more and more he filled in the gap of missing words with fantastic gestures and sound effects. That always makes for a good story, but there was only so much you could do with gestures and sounds when you got down to basic questions like, "What did you eat?" Oto-san was a master, though. He was so good at coping that it fooled most people. If you were not careful, he would swiftly describe as much as he could and deftly move the conversation on to something that was easier to talk about. He glossed over those muddled, difficult parts. I don't think he was doing it consciously. I think it happened naturally, like how water found its way around any obstacle. Oto-san's voice would find the path of least resistance so that he could keep his monologue going. I knew this, though, and stopped him to question and clarify. I wanted to dig in and see just how much he recalled. These days, he either couldn't remember or he couldn't find the words to tell me. He could remember that he had eaten, and that it was good, and that there were 4 side dishes to go with his rice. He could always remember that the lunch at day service was better than the food at the nursing home where he sometimes went for a short stay, but he was no longer able to tell me exactly what he ate. I had the menu. The day service provided a weekly calendar so I could check and see what the main dish and side dishes were. Oto-san really struggled to tell me what kind of meat they ate. He could tell me they had meat, but he couldn't tell me if it was chicken, fish, pork, or beef. His struggle wasn't just a memory issue either. I was no longer sure if he could determine what was meat and what wasn't. I knew this because of a family outing. One Sunday morning, we decided to visit a local diner for breakfast. Breakfast was one of my favorite meals, and I loved going out for breakfast. Oto-san loved bread, and because he had a sweet tooth, I recommended French toast. We explained that it was bread cooked with egg. He mopped up the butter and sweet syrup, and with his last bite, exclaimed, "That was some good fish!" He was happy about the taste, but complained a bit because he was expecting toast. We were stunned and stumped. How could he think it was fish? I could see how the bit of crispy egg on the edge of the French toast might have made him think of something other than toast. But fish? The only thing I could think of is that a lot of Japanese dishes are simmered with a generous portion of sugar or mirin, a sweet rice wine. The outing was a disappointment. Though Oto-san liked the fish, he was sure the restaurant had made a mistake with his order. Back to our pre-dinner ritual. While my purpose in calling Oto-san to dinner early was to give him the chance to socialize and me the chance to monitor the condition of his condition, the third purpose was probably the most important: to spare Akira. I made sure our chat happened before I called Akira to the table. This 10 to 15 minutes before dinner was what kept the peace in our home. It meant that by the time dinner started, Oto-san was ready to be quiet and dig in. It meant we could all 3 enjoy an evening show together. In a perfect world, or rather in my vision of a perfect family, the TV would have been off. I would have loved it if we could have all 3 chatted about our day over dinner. Wasn't that normal for a healthy family? I quickly discovered that it didn't work for our family because Otosan wasn't capable of listening. His version of chatting was a monologue that his son had no interest in hearing. So we did dinner a little differently. The TV was the focal point for our family of three at mealtimes, and we enjoyed certain TV shows together while we ate. This kind of shared experience worked for us. What didn't work was calling both men to dinner at the same time. If we were lucky, Otosan would start eating right away and then become engrossed with whatever program was on TV. However, if I accidentally made eye contact, he took that as a cue and began a story about his day. If he started talking, Akira would turn up the volume on the TV to drown out his father's voice, and also in hopes that his father would take the hint and quiet down. Otosan never understood the hint. I don't think he even noticed the volume had changed. I couldn't ignore him and automatically started nodding my head in response, which only encouraged him to keep talking. Then, as Akira's irritation grew, the TV got louder, and then I got irritated with Akira. Through it all, Otosan kept talking. I didn't want to feel irritated with Akira, and I also didn't want to ignore Otosan. After a long day, I wanted nothing more than to relax and enjoy TV while we ate. The truth was, I began calling Otosan to dinner early because I was selfish. It usually worked, too. When it didn't, and he started talking during the dinner anyway, we hit pause. Yep. The biggest secret I found for ensuring a peaceful mealtime was watching pre-recorded shows. We almost always watched pre-recorded shows. I couldn't control when Otosan would start talking, or even when a bowl would get knocked over and require emergency cleanup. However, I could control what we were watching and when. I know. In the larger scheme of things, who cares if I missed a bit of a TV show? Did it really matter? No, it didn't matter. But eliminating little frustrations left more room for acceptance around the bigger frustrations. So I almost always called Otosan to dinner early. We watched pre-recorded shows and used the pause button liberally. Okay, those are my life hacks for today. The wooden spoons, calling Otosan to dinner early, and using the pause button with pre-recorded shows. So anyway, hopefully I was able to get through this. There's all kinds of noise. It's so funny that I'm talking about noise and being hypersensitive to noise in this episode because while I've been recording, there's construction going on outside. So hopefully it did not get picked up by the mic. And I will be back again next week with the next section of the book. We're getting close to the end. Bye for now.